All right, let's get right into it. This is an absolutely incredible story of survival, a real against-all-odds situation.
Just picture it for a second. You're on a red-eye flight, it's dark, and then that constant drone of the engines, it just stops. Silence, except for the sound of wind whipping past a massive 200-ton plane.
So how in the world do you land a 200-ton glider in the middle of the night? That was the unbelievable challenge facing the crew of Air Transat Flight 236 back on August 24, 2001. I mean, nobody had ever even tried to glide a commercial jet from that far out with no power.
But to really get how they ended up in this terrifying situation, we actually have to rewind about 9 days. It all started in a maintenance hangar, with one tiny mistake, a mistake measured in millimeters that kicked off this whole catastrophic chain of events.
So, it all began with a pretty routine maintenance check. Mechanics found some little metal chips in the right engine's oil, which is a big red flag. They knew they had to replace the engine. The catch? The only spare they had on hand was a slightly older Rolls-Royce model.
Now you might think, an engine is an engine, right? Well, not exactly. It's kind of like trying to use the wrong charger for your phone. It might look like it fits, but those tiny differences in the connections can cause a huge problem. That's exactly what happened here. The parts for the newer plane and the parts for the older engine, they just were not designed to be put together.
Okay, so here's where things really start to go wrong. The lead technician is under a ton of pressure to get this plane back in the air. But get this, he can't access the digital service manual. The network is down. He tries 3 different computers. So instead of hunting down a physical copy, he takes a shortcut, a really, really bad shortcut. He basically forces the parts to fit, creating this tiny point of friction where a hydraulic line was now rubbing right up against a fuel line. A ticking time bomb, literally grinding away at the metal.
All right, fast forward to the flight itself. Now we're going to see how that hidden, ticking time bomb of a mechanical flaw gets made so much worse by a critical human error up in the cockpit. So about 4.5 hours into the flight, an advisory pops up, fuel imbalance. The pilots look, and yep, the fuel in the right wing tank is way lower than the left. Now what's actually happening is that fuel line has finally worn through. It's just gushing fuel out into the night sky. But the pilots, they figured it was just a computer glitch, a faulty sensor. This is the moment that changes everything. Instead of grabbing the physical checklist, the book that has the step-by-step procedure for this exact problem, they decide to work from memory. And because they did that, they missed one, single, absolutely critical instruction.
Thinking they were solving a simple imbalance, they opened something called a cross-feed valve. The idea was to move fuel from the full tank over to the empty one to balance the plane. But what they actually did was the worst possible thing. They opened a direct line from the good, full tank right into the engine that was leaking. They were literally just feeding the leak, dumping all their good fuel out into the Atlantic. So now, with fuel just pouring out of the plane at a catastrophic rate, they hit the point of no return. There was no way they had enough fuel to make it to Lisbon anymore. The situation had just become a full-blown emergency.
And then it happened. At 6:13 a.m., the right engine sputters and dies. 13 minutes later, the left one follows. Total silence. The main generators cut out, and the entire cabin is plunged into darkness. All you can hear is the wind and the sound of 300 terrified people. Think about the sheer scale of this challenge. They are now in a 200-ton glider, and they have to somehow navigate it 144 kilometers, that's almost 90 miles, to the nearest piece of land, which happens to be a tiny military airbase on an island in the middle of the ocean. It's just mind-boggling. Down in the cabin, it was pure terror. The crew is telling people to brace for a water landing. Passengers are fumbling with life jackets in the pitch dark. People are thinking about their families, thinking this is it. They are literally just falling through the sky with no idea what's going on. Up in the cockpit, Captain Robert Pichet knows he has exactly one shot at this. No engines means no power to pull up and try again. No go-arounds. He has to nail this landing on the first attempt. He's actually drawing on his old experience as a glider pilot, making these steep, sharp turns to bleed off altitude and line up with a runway he can barely see.
He brings the plane down hard. I mean, it hits the runway at such a high speed that it shreds all 8 of the main tires, and sparks even start a small fire. But here's the miracle. They get the doors open, they get the slides deployed, and in less than 2 minutes, every single person is evacuated. All 306 people on board survived. 0 fatalities. It's just an unbelievable outcome.
So when you look back, it's just a stark reminder that big disasters almost never happen because of one single thing. For this flight to end up in that situation, you needed this whole chain of failures. The wrong part, the unread manual, the crew relying on memory, even the fact that a recommended fuel leak warning system hadn't been installed. It was a perfect storm of things going wrong.
And really, this whole story is just such a powerful lesson, right? It shows how these incredibly complex systems we rely on every day, they depend on every single tiny step being done right. One little error can start a disaster. It shows how fragile things can be, but it also shows something else, that with incredible skill, calm under pressure, and a bit of courage, you can pull off the impossible.